Hey everyone, this is Steve Kik with the MMLA Connect podcast. Today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Paul Isely from Grand Valley State University. Doctor, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
You have donated your time to the MMLA for the past few years, and you've done our economic update. And so we just want to first and foremost take some time to thank you for doing that and continuing to be involved with the MMLA. Before we get into your career and everything, why is mortgage so important to you? Like, why do you feel the need to continue to give back to the industry and be a part of the MMLA?
Well, for me, it's number one, a broader issue of making sure that every business in West Michigan has better information than they can get by surfing the web or watching the news when things get truncated into small bits. So that's important to me. And it's really important that one of the driving forces we've had across West Michigan has been the housing industry. And this is an integral part of that. And so we spend a lot of time wanting to make sure that people are making good decisions.
Do you feel that homeownership is one of the key threads to keeping the economy strong?
Well, it's certainly a thread. And here in West Michigan, it's been something that's been powering the economy right now when some other things have been a little weak. So right now it has outsized importance.
Yeah. So, we can talk about economics and all the fun stuff and what's going on in our industry. But before we get there, I'd like to take a look at how you got into economics, and how you got into your career, what you did. Were you sitting at home and just, thinking about, how you can, help the economy and what's going on? Where did it start? Where did your love for economics and finance and all that come into play? And tell us how you got where you were or are.
Yeah. I mean, I got here sort of through an odd path. So all through my high school career and early college career, my entire plan was to be a physicist. So we spent lots and lots of time working on that, thinking about that, doing that. And while I was in high school, I did some other things. I did things like Model UN, where we had policy issues. It was infuriating to me that people didn't understand basic economic concepts when you're trying to match things together. Probably the thing that resulted in me being an economist more than anything else was marching band. It's a little odd, but here's the connection. In high school, marching band would practice in the morning, and so would the football team. And I'm old enough that the newspapers used to be in the library, used to be on those bamboo rods, and you would go get a newspaper on a bamboo rod and be able to read it. Well, by the time marching band got done practicing, the football team had already showered and was at the library before school, waiting for school to start. So they had picked up every newspaper that had a sports page in it, every single one. And so what was left for me to read was the Wall Street Journal. And so through high school, I read the Wall Street Journal. And when I got to college, getting my physics degree, I had to take general education classes that weren't part of my major. And that included things like economics. And economics was just really easy to me, just really simple, because I had spent all those years reading the newspaper on it.
Yeah.
And by the time I had gotten through my general education, I was halfway to an econ degree, so I finished it off. And so as I was coming out of school, I was working in a physics lab, and I had both an economics and a physics degree, and I was trying to decide to go on in what. And this was the end of the Cold War. Physicists were all out of jobs, and I'm like, well, I like to eat, and I like both physics and economics. I guess I'm going on in economics, and it's easier for me anyways. So it's a sort of an odd path, but I sort of ended up here by accident. What's really interesting is at the end of high school, I took a skills assessment test to determine where I should end up. All right. And I had completely forgotten about it. And when I was moving to West Michigan, I found it and I opened it up, and the number one choice there was economist. So in the end, I ended up exactly where this test said I should be.
That's kind of cool. I'm glad that you still have that test. It's amazing that you can look back on it and it's like, oh, yep, called it out right there.
Second best job for me was bus driver. So I think I chose better.
That was the number 2 choice?
Yes.
Wow. Well, we're thankful that you ended up, in economics. But if we peel it back a little bit, physics. Come on, let's talk about this. Not only do you have a degree in physics, but physics was what you really wanted to get into when
Uh,
you were younger. Where did that come from?
well, I
Physics.
I loved astronomy, and in middle school, I mowed a ton of lawns so I could buy a research grade telescope, and I absolutely enjoyed thinking about dark matter and the expansion of space and those types of things. And so I spent a lot of time thinking very hard about physics. And it was something I was really, really, really interested in. And it was just my dad was always very curious, always very into history, always very into science. And we were just taught to be curious about things. And physics was really cool because it was thinking really hard about really simple things.
Yeah.
And you really had to explore very deeply. And all of those skills in physics translate to economics. So, and then I had a second benefit because economists stole all the math they use from physics. So what actually got me through grad school was not my undergraduate in economics. It was actually my physics degree because it was that math that got me through the graduate program.
Yeah. I love that. So for undergrad, you were at, was it University of
Yeah.
Wisconsin-Madison, correct?
Yep. Yep.
And then you got your doctorate from Purdue University.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about your time in college and why you chose those two schools?
Well, UW-Madison was 45 miles from where I grew up. And because I was being very practical, I was considering both engineering and physics at the time. But once I decided physics, in Wisconsin, all the regional schools at the time had something they specialized in. And the ones near me didn't specialize in physics. And the big flagship one would. So if I wanted to do physics, I had to go to UW.
Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense.
When I got done there, I had to figure out where I wanted to go. And so I looked, and I said, well, probably going to stay in sort of a Big Ten world. And so I sent out 10 graduate applications in economics. And I sent only economics and not physics ones at that time, because in my physics lab, some of the PhD students were coming back and telling me about the job market. And the job market was just really bad. And like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through the masochism that is a graduate degree like this
You're smart, man.
without a job. And in physics, you also start your job in something called a postdoc, which is paid almost nothing. So you're 40 before you start earning money. And I just thought that was a bad choice. So I sent out my 10 applications in economics. And of those 10 schools, 3 of them accepted me, but none of them with money. And none of them accepted me with a graduate assistantship of any kind. And I'm like, well, I sort of need money to go to school. So I got
Yeah.
to figure this out. And I looked at the 3 schools, and the one that was the best match for me, and the one that I had the best chance of getting a graduate assistantship after the fact with, was Purdue. So I researched some of the faculty there, got to understand the school well. And I called down and said, you've accepted me. I'm going to come down on my own dime and check out what you got. Okay. And while I'm down there, I want to talk to this professor, and particularly Marie Thursby. And I flew down there. I talked with them. I had read all of Marie Thursby's papers. And so I was able to walk through with her. This is exciting. These are things I want to do. And at the end of that trip, I remember Anne Gretencourt, who was the graduate secretary, came out as I was getting ready to leave and handed me a letter and said, here's your graduate assistantship. And
Wow.
so it was the fact that I understood what I needed to do. I took a risk. I took my own money to take that risk to go down and prove to them I was really interested. And not only was I interested, I cared enough to know what the faculty were doing
Yeah.
that was linked to the things I wanted to do. And that resulted in me getting an assistantship.
Where did that confidence come from? I can tell you there's not a lot of high school kids or even college graduates that would have done what you did in order to, kind of prove your point and get what you needed because you got what you needed or what you wanted, right?
Yep. Yep. I don't know where the confidence comes from. You know, it's
Have you always had it?
I've I've always known what I can do and what I can't. I've had a good, one of my gifts is I have a relatively good understanding of what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And I'm willing to take a risk for myself. So I am willing to take a stretch, take a risk to put myself in a better location. And if an opportunity arises, I always grab it. I've never been in a situation where an opportunity shows up and you grab it where you end up worse off than when you started.
Yeah.
So sometimes it doesn't feel like it's the right one. Sometimes it's like, why am I doing this?
Why did
And all
I?
of a sudden it's like, look at this. It's opened all of these other things up.
Yeah,
This is so cool. So yeah, I mean,
that's powerful.
yeah, it's powerful. And my parents have always been there to say, back it. We're there. In some ways I'm taking risks, you know, 22, 23 years old, those risks, you have long time to race.
Yeah.
And um, if mom and dad are there to say, take the risk, and if it fails, we'll help you get on another path, that risk is actually mitigated.
Yeah. So it's all about having that feeling the support and trusting that you have the support and taking a chance, right?
That's right. And believing in yourself. You always have to believe in yourself.
100%. I agree there. All right. So you make it to Purdue, get your graduate degree, then what, right? Because you've been in West Michigan for quite some time now. So tell us how that came about.
Well, it's sort of interesting. I'm going to tell you one more story about Purdue.
Absolutely.
One more story about
We're
Purdue.
here for it.
So as it turns out, Purdue let in too many graduate assistants. All right. And so I got to the end of my first year and they needed to call. So what they did is they created an exam that was impossible to pass. Okay. And you had to pass them all in order to get through. And so people who got through the first part, they let them move on. And I was in the second part. So essentially I was saying, they said I wasn't going to make it through the program. So they give you a second shot. You can take the exam again. Okay. So the exam was 2 days after my grandma's funeral. So I could not go to her funeral. Took that exam. And on the very first exam, it became obvious that they created a question that was unsolvable. And we actually gave that question to the best student in our class to work on while we were taking the next set of exams. These were 4 half-day exams you had to take, and you had to get an A on all of them to go forward. All right. And I failed that. So then you go to orals. You appeal and they'll let you do orals. And I went and did my oral and they asked me questions until I couldn't answer any. And obviously they know more than me. So,
Yeah.
and I failed. And then I had to make a decision. Do I appeal again? Because there was one more appeal that I could do. If I got 4 faculty to back me and say that they would be on my committee, they would reconsider. All right. And so at that moment, I had to decide, do I want to be a high school teacher or do I want to move forward with this? And I looked at it and said, there's as many years to become a high school teacher as there is to finishing my PhD list. So I went in and we appealed and I found 4 faculty, which included 3 of the 4 faculty that I had talked to on my very first trip there, who knew me all the way through. All right. And I appealed.
Makes sense.
February 1st, I got a letter that said I had satisfactorily completed the preliminary requirements. My GA-ship, my assistantship said I had to do that by January 1st. So I lost my assistantship, which was really what they were doing. I lost my assistantship. So now I'm like, do I go forward? And so I had to now borrow money in order to stay in the program.
Yep.
I made the decision that I would do that. And that summer, I worked on my dissertation all summer long. At the end of summer, I went into my major professor and said, look at what I have. And he says, this is amazing, Paul. You've done all this on your own. Because I'm not a GA, I had all this time to work on stuff. And so I had this
You didn't have all that busy work?
yeah. And so I had this dissertation that was probably 2/3 done at that point. He's like, this is amazing. You have to go show Marie Thursby. Notice the thread we have here. And I go and show Marie Thursby. She said, you've done all of this on your own. I said, yes. She said, there's nothing I can do for you right now, but I will let you review papers for me for $13 an hour. And at the end of this semester, this student is going to be done with his fellowship. I'm going to give you that fellowship. And I was on fellowship for the rest of my time there, which meant that I was being paid to be in school and I didn't have to work.
Wow.
It put me in a much different place. So actually losing my money resulted in me getting my PhD done sooner and being in the market.
It's pretty cool to look back
Yeah.
and
At the
see
time, it
how
was awful. At the
yeah,
time, it was
how
awful.
it all worked out, right?
All right. So then I had to figure out where I'm going to work. And this is 1994, going 1994, going into 1995. There are three places where you can get jobs as an econ professor. You can get jobs teaching, you can get jobs in government, and you can get jobs in business. Okay. In 1994, we had just come out of a shallow recession. The states had budget deficits and the schools weren't hiring very much. On top of that, there was a change in the law about required retirements that said they couldn't do that. So now you had a bunch of older professors staying on longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
No job openings.
That was the winter Newt Gingrich shut down the government right during the hiring market for econ. So the government wasn't hiring. It was ugly, ugly. But I had 150 applications out. And in those days you had to make them by printing them, putting them in the mail, doing all that sort of stuff. And it was about $10 a mailing. My dad goes, "Where do you think you're going to end up, Paul?" I said, "It's likely I'll end up nowhere, but I have no idea." He said, "Give me your best guess of the 150 you've sent out. Where do you think you're going to end up?" And I said, "If I end up where I'm supposed to be, I'll either be at Northern Iowa or Grand Valley State University."
How did you know that?
The job description that they were, if you go back to my very first day, when they asked, "Why are you in graduate school?" I said, "My goal in graduate school is to teach at a regional campus in the Midwest." If you look at the way I went through the program, I had created the ability to teach in multiple areas of economics, as opposed to going very deep in one. So I was set up for this regional school that was going to have multiple teaching needs, more than I was for someplace like U of M that needs you to go very deep in one place.
Yeah.
And their job description was very consistent with what I am. Well, I didn't get the job at Grand Valley and I didn't get the job at Northern. But then there's something called the visitor market. And the visitor market then cleans up everybody who didn't get a job, and every place that has a temporary job then does stuff.
Fills
Right.
you in.
So I was sitting on the mainframe and an email pings in, right? This was before these cell phones and things. So you didn't have constant stuff. If you weren't
Right.
sitting at the computer, you didn't get your email. And I was sitting there and it goes ping. And I open it up and it's from Grand Valley State University, Dr. Harry saying, "Are you interested in being a visitor?" And I typed yes. And I hit reply. He sent that same email out to 10 other people. And he denies it to this day. But I believe I got the job at Grand Valley State University because I was the first person to reply because I happened to be sitting at the computer.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just that opportunity.
So set myself up. I gave myself the ability to take advantage of luck. But in the end, luck got me into the job. So now I'm a visitor, which means I only get a 1-year contract. And so I'm in the market again the next year. And Grand Valley was in the market and then pulled out of the market. And I ended up not getting a job that year. And I had to do it again. And I'm sitting in my office at Grand Valley and the provost's daughter applies for the job. And I'm like, I guess I'm not going to be here.
I'm not the guy.
And the dean didn't like me because he thought I wouldn't be able to do research. And I'm like, I'm not going to have a job. I'm going to have to go figure this out. And 5 days before the decision had to happen, I got my first publication. And it was a publication that I got because my dad was able to give me some specialized data that I was able to use to explore telephone pricing in a way that nobody else could do without that data. And so my dad gave me a leg up and I got my first publication, which negated the dean's argument. And the department needed a macroeconomist more than they needed a microeconomist. And they needed somebody who could teach a variety of classes. So remember, I had set myself up to teach a variety of classes. And the provost's daughter was from Berkeley. She was very specialized and very deep. And because I had aligned myself with what a regional school was, I beat out the competition and was able to stay here.
And that was how long ago?
That was 1995. I just received my 30-year service award. And I started here when I was 27 years old.
It's pretty special.
Yeah.
They've kept you around for that long. They must like you.
Well, you do your job. You get to stay around. Grand Valley is a special place. I like.
It is. And I'm glad we brought it to Grand Valley because I'm an alum myself. So you thought you were going to be in the Big Ten. You ended up at Grand Valley, but it's probably just as good, and it's in a great area. I'm always going to, tout GVSU for how great it is and in my, academics as well. I played a couple years of football there, when we were at the height, part of a national championship team in 2005. You know, it's a great spot, and we're lucky to have you in West Michigan at Grand Valley and continuing to teach economics and all the other business, meetings that you do. Because I think I've seen you in the last 12 months. I've probably seen you talk 5 times in the last year.
Probably. In the
It's
last
every
20
time.
in the last 20 days, if I'm counting right, I've done 15 presentations.
Yikes, a lot.
Being in a school like this, being in a town like this, gives me the opportunity to create impact. I'm able to go and help people understand how the economy is working. I'm able to take the time to help them understand that. And they're able to make better business decisions. People who come back to me and said, you said these 3 things last year, and I made these couple of changes in my business because of them. And we're more successful. That's awesome. Scary too. It's really scary because if I'm wrong,
Right.
but,
Right. But you've done a pretty good job at being as right as you can be, given any outside, major events happening that are out of your control. You've been pretty accurate, right?
we've been reasonably accurate, and generally I'll tell people why I think something's happening. So if they actually listen to me, if the things I say are happening aren't happening, they should stop believing the direction it's going for the year,
Yeah.
And so, it's not hard, it's not hard. If you understand why somebody said something, you can watch it and say, he said that this was going to happen and it's not. Okay, then we're going to be more careful about the rest of that because he's given us the roadmap to why he got there. And the roadmap's not working now. Okay, and I can do that because most places give me enough time to do that when I talk.
Speaking of the roadmap, from a mortgage perspective, can we talk about where you see 2026 going? Let's talk about the roadmap in the mortgage industry and the real estate industry.
Yeah. So as we look across West Michigan right now, what our surveys are telling us and what we're being able to divine from our analysis is that we expect pretty good sales growth this year across businesses, but we don't expect very good employment growth. So what's happening right now is firms are getting more efficient and don't need as many workers to make the same amount of stuff, whether that's automation, whether that's AI, whether that's just cleaning up their workforce since COVID. They're becoming more efficient. And so we're looking at a year where employment will likely be a little bit lighter, even though we have a lack of workers in many sectors that need to be picked up. So if you have the right job skills, you're still okay. So we expect that to be the case. We expect inflation to stay up, in that 2.5% to 3% range. And that's what CEOs across West Michigan are telling us. And that leaves us with interest rates. All right. And when
Everyone's favorite question, right?
Yep. And what we know is interest rates have decoupled from what the Federal Reserve is doing. Okay. And it's decoupled from the Federal Reserve is doing because of a lot of the activities that we're doing internationally. And because because we have chosen to bring the Federal Reserve politically into play, meaning we're attacking the Federal Reserve politically. Okay. And what that means is that over time, people in other countries have chosen to save their money here in the United States. And they've chosen to save it here because we're boring. We're really boring. All right. When it comes to monetary policy, nothing exciting ever until now. And now we have all sorts of drama around the Federal Reserve. That drama is scaring people. It's scaring people in other countries. And they're like, well, that's what we have at home. That's what I was trying to avoid.
Yeah.
They were saving it here because the Federal Reserve was much more stable than what they were seeing at home. And so what they're doing is they're taking their money out of the United States. Now, and you can see that with gold prices and silver prices and things like that. But you can also see it in interest rates. And so what that's doing is it's forcing the interest rates higher because there's less savings to lend out. And if there's less savings to lend to businesses and to homeowners, then we're going to raise the price to ration it.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. So even though the Federal Reserve has cut interest rates by 1.75% over the last 18 months, okay, even though it's done that, the mortgage rate has only gone down 0.5%. All right. And that's because of this de-dollarization. And that's going to be with us forever. But what we do know is interest rates have come down some, and we do know those mortgage rates will continue to drop a little bit later this year, probably more in the second half of the year than in the first half of the year. So we would expect coming out of summer that there'll be more activity in refis than what we see now. All right. Because we expect that sometime during summer, there will be a larger rate cut. And that's because President Trump's nominees will have more power in the Federal Reserve this summer than they do right now. And he's nominating people who have a desire to decrease interest rates as opposed to keep them steady. So we know that that's going to increase the chances that interest rates will get dropped.
You've been through many governments, right? And many, presidents as an economist. Does this presidency pose any different challenges than what you've seen? Is it different now or is it the same? You're an economist. The rest of us don't look at it from your perspective every day and throughout the years. So I guess, what I'm asking is, are we in an unusual political climate right now?
Yes, yes. We rarely see the government actually affect businesses very much. The economy are businesses selling to consumers, and the government has always sort of been this sideshow. And they might affect you on the fringe, but they don't affect you in the core. What they do is they set the playing field. The government sets the playing field. It sets the set of rules, and then you play within those rules. So it's like playing football. We know what the rules are, and as long as we play within those rules, we can go forward and get better. What's happened over the course of the last year is we've had drastic changes in how the government is viewing many different things. So businesses and consumers don't know whether we're playing football anymore or whether we're playing basketball. The government's made it hard for us to understand the playing field we're on. And not only that, we don't know whether the playing field we're on is going to stay here forever or change when the next president comes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you think about it, this makes it hard for businesses to decide how to invest. They don't know what to invest in. If we go back to that sports analogy, if we're playing football, I want a 300-pound lineman. If I'm playing basketball, I want a 6'5" skinny guy.
Yeah.
They're two different things. Well, if I'm making EVs, I need different things than if I'm making gasoline cars. All right. And just that's one place where we've seen that drastic change. And it's affecting businesses' ability to invest. And over the last 2 quarters, we're now seeing business investment drop despite the amazing spending happening on AI right now. I mean, those top 4 companies in AI have spent $350 billion on CapEx alone, more than $60 billion of that here in the United States. Even with all of that spending, building all those data centers, we're seeing business investment drop. And it's because they don't know how to spend their money and they don't know how to play their money so that it will work now and 4 years from now.
What's your best advice to those business owners that are in flux right now and they're trying to make business decisions? What's your best advice to them?
Well, it's hard because every business is different. But what we do know are the businesses who hold steady too long are the ones who lose. You have to figure out what things you can invest in and what things you can spend money on to move your business forward. Or if you wait till things to become certain, they're never going to become certain. You have to make a gamble and go. If you don't, you're going to lose anyways.
It's always a gamble, right? Whether you do something or don't do something, it's a gamble one way or the other.
You want to mitigate the risk, but
Yeah.
you got to take the gamble eventually. You can't sit on your hands waiting for it to become certain.
Yep. So, I guess looking forward, what would you say are the biggest opportunities in 2026 and what are the biggest threats that we have coming up?
Yeah. So the biggest opportunity and the biggest threat is actually the same thing. And right now that's AI and automation. It's something that everybody has to play in, but if you do it wrong, it will destroy your company. And so it is deadly important right now that you think about how do you change how you do business and how you can involve the systems that are being created today to do that. In fact, the stock market crashed last week was because investors started to believe that AI was going to replace Excel and Word and all those things that you've gotten good at using over a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it came back, but this is starting to get to a point where we believe that there's going to be a sea change in how business is actually done. And if you don't start playing now on how to do that, if it shifts before you figure it out, you're going to be in a bad way. So you have to do it. You have no choice. And then you have to mitigate the risks around it. And there are substantial risks around it. And the primary risk for us in the use of AI is a decrease in human knowledge in your business systems. And that decrease in human knowledge is going to become more critical over time because most companies today have used AI to replace those bottom level jobs.
Yeah.
Got those entry level jobs. That's nice. But now they're forgetting that the reason you can replace those bottom level jobs is you can use these AI agents and then you have this human that watches it and says, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
But why does that person know it's okay? Because they did all those bottom level jobs.
Yeah.
So 5 years from today, there's going to be nobody or very few people who did those jobs. And they're going to have a hard time watching to see whether AI is doing the things it's supposed to be doing. And so we have to think about how are we deploying AI so that we don't get rid of the human knowledge that we need in order to harness what AI can do.
How do you see that affecting the mortgage real estate industry specifically?
Yeah. So it's going to change how all the transactions are done. And it's going to do that very, very quickly. We know finance and banking and insurance are working a lot of time right now on training their AI systems. About the only holdback are some regulatory concerns. But it won't be long before AI makes the decision on the mortgage. It won't be long before AI does the transactions that are between brokers and title insurance and other things. You
Yeah.
know, those transactions we can automate and we can automate it with a bot. So within the within the industry, people have to get to the point where they understand, how do I leverage AI so that I'm here when it's done?
Yeah.
All right. I don't know how fast it will affect your particular industry because the banking side has lots of regulatory roadblocks.
Yeah.
But those will get knocked down eventually because the efficiency gains are so huge. And by efficiency gains, I mean fewer people needed to do a transaction.
Yeah.
All right.
We're already using AI, a lot of times, and we're using automated underwriting. We've been using most lenders are using automated underwriting through Freddie, Fannie, and Ginnie. Uh, and that's what our underwriter is matching up with, do our documents say what we've input into the system that the automated underwriting is reviewing? They're matching that up, but ultimately, we're going off of the decision that the automated underwriter says. Yes, there are some portfolio type things and some one-offs that you can do, but ultimately, it's not the person making the judgment. It's actually the automated underwriting. So we're already kind of there.
Yeah. And what that does is it leads to a world where there's less creative solutions. All right. Because AI is constrained by what's already happened. So is there a way to piece together a business deal that makes this work? Can you view that? Can you see it? Right now, that still requires human intelligence.
Yeah.
So the more we automate this, the more only a certain segment becomes accessible. even though there's these pieces out here that if a human looked at it, they would go, this could be worth the risk. And it could be worth the risk because of these. And should I make a judgment decision here or not? And in some ways, that's the difference between big banks and little banks and things like that right now.
Yeah.
But the more you automate these, the more you get cookie cutter for everything.
Yeah. Yep. And when it's not cookie cutter, it doesn't fit into the system. And that's when, that's when things get a little bit more difficult. So
Right.
that makes perfect sense. Well, we have a few questions here before we wrap up from our audience. You ready for them?
Yeah.
All right. So first question here says, I'm fascinated by economic theory and the way different economists can study the same data yet arrive at various conclusions. I once spoke with a respected PhD who explained that most economists have a trusted framework that guides their findings. Since Dr. Isely attended Purdue, which is known for not enforcing a specific economic framework, I would like to submit the following questions. How will the current U.S. tariff policies improve or deteriorate the U.S. economy over the coming year, and why? Furthermore, how might another economist with a different perspective argue against your position?
Okay. And which can you say U.S. what policies?
How will current U.S. tariff policies
Sure.
improve or deteriorate the U.S. economy over the coming years?
So the U.S. tariff policies are doing something in particular, a couple things in particular. Understand that actually tariff policy will become a tailwind and not a headwind when we get to the middle of the year, because the worst tariffs we had were last July. So by the time we get to next July and compare year versus year, it's actually going to be lower tariffs and things are going to move forward. But outside of that, what tariffs are doing a couple things. It's a tax, and a tax results in money moving from the private sector to the public sector. And to the extent that you have a belief structure that the public sector is better at allocating resources than the private sector, it will influence how you think that outcome will happen. But right now that money's not being spent. And since it's not being spent, it's actually slowing the economy down. Okay. The second thing is this desire to move everything to the United States. Well, there's a piece that understands that trade creates value, and it creates value because there's things I do really well and there's things you do really well. But if I don't have trade and I can do what I do well and you do what you do well, and we can trade them. So you can ask me for an economic analysis and I can ask you to help me get through my mortgage. And in the end, we get done a lot faster than if I tried to do both of those things myself.
Yeah.
We're losing that, and it'll be harder for people to see, but in the end, it will make us all poorer. We actually have less time to do other things because we're doing the things that we're less good at. Right?
That we should be spending money on and hiring out for, is what you're saying?
Yeah. And so it's the concept of comparative advantage, and that's there. So where are the questions in this? The vast majority of economists are very, very worried about that comparative advantage. You have to get to a very fringe economist to not worry about that comparative. What we do know is there are a couple secondary effects that could be relatively large as well. One of them is non-free trade. So we know definitively that there's been strategic use of trade by China, and there's been strategic use of trade that runs counter to the concepts that are underlying free trade. So economists that worry a lot about that would find that finding some type of trade constraint between the United States and China might result in better outcomes, because we will move away from a country that's been misusing free trade. How big you think that problem is, and there's different ways to calculate it. So it's not a really certain number. So if you look at the literature, you might see this and you might see this. If you think this part of the literature is better, you'll come up with a different answer than if you look, this is better. But that's one issue. And then there's the question of how much onshoring and how fast it can happen. To me, that's an empirical question, and we'll know the answer in 5 or 6 years. The concept that we would have all these factories come back in 1 year is just nonsense. Anybody who works in real estate knows that to build a factory, just to build the shell of a factory, is going to take more than a year. just getting the utilities there are going to take more than a year. And so this is a 5 or 6 year path to see how well that happens. The question is, does that have value? We don't know the answer to that yet. And there are some theories that say it it's not going to be good because that comparative advantage issue is so big. And there's other economic theory that would say, oh, it's going to be good because it gets rid of that strategic and that that military misuse of trade. So in some ways, it's the question of, were we already in a trade war or not? And the answer is, we were already in a trade war with some countries, but not all of them.
And now are we in a trade war with all of them?
And now we're in a trade war with all of them. I mean, we have we have a company that went out of business because for some reason the pack that they were selling was very popular in South Africa. President Trump insulted South Africa, and all of a sudden they couldn't sell anything to South Africa. I mean, South Africa didn't say you couldn't sell stuff there, but the people in South Africa were pissed at anything made in the United States.
Yeah.
And as a result, they went out of business. I know another firm that makes fishing lures, and they sold most of them to Canada. Again, there was no restriction from them sending them to Canada. There was no tariff on them,
Yeah.
but they went out of business because nobody in Canada would buy them. So we need to be careful how we play with those that aren't strategically causing us problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. So, next question. Always curious to hear what an economist thinks West Michigan's competitive advantages compared to other regions, and what are some barriers to growth in our area as well?
Well, let's do the barriers first. So the barriers for us right now is we've run out of workers. We just don't have enough workers to grow as fast as we could actually do. All right. And it's one of the reasons why we actually at this point have a comparative advantage in automation. We ran out of workers 10 years ago. So the firms in West Michigan started putting automation and AI into their systems faster than any place else in the United States. And so we're seeing our factories outcompete what's happening elsewhere because of that automation, which is really exciting. One of the things that I find, and I work in lots of different places, that I think is a very severe competitive advantage for us, is we talk, we work together. We are sort of running in the same direction, but we're not a clown suit filled with cats running in different directions. We sort of talk to each other. It's not uncommon to say, hey, I'm doing this business process. Just go to the other side of the state. They'll consider that a secret. They won't talk about that.
Yeah.
And as a result, every firm's got to learn something themselves. I think that's a huge advantage.
Yeah.
The last advantage, and it's a problem for us because it's eroding, is the number of family-owned businesses. Not only is the value created in the firms, but the value that goes to the owners, in many cases, stays here in West Michigan and is given to our nonprofits and helps this public-private linkage that we have on this side of the state. Well, what's happening is these business owners are baby boomers, and they're reaching a point where they got to give up their firm, and their kids don't want it. And so then it goes to private equity, who's not from West Michigan. And now when decisions are made, should we stay in West Michigan? What supplier should we use? They're not doing it from a West Michigan lens.
Yeah.
All right. It has been a substantial benefit to West Michigan that we have that. And it is eroding. And it's something we're watching very carefully because I believe that over the next 10 years, that is our biggest threat here in West Michigan.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the aging baby boomers and the population, those business owners are ready to sell. And if they don't have anybody to sell to, yeah, I mean, it poses a interesting problem. And I know a lot of family-owned businesses, because that's what we use around here, right? If we know someone that owns a family business, we're more likely, if you grew up in West Michigan, to go to those people than anywhere else. So never thought about that. And it's an interesting point to bring up. Definitely. Well, before I let you go here, I think I've overstayed my welcome here, but I appreciate your time. We always leave our listeners with one positive thing, and we'd love to hear your take on this. Leave us with something positive for 2026.
Well, one of the things we're seeing already in 2026 is a resurgence of entrepreneurism in West Michigan. So we're seeing that the people who've lost their jobs over the last couple of years, And we're seeing those young people who can't find a job because of AI have chosen to take that energy and create new businesses. Those new businesses are what's going to cause us to grow. Those new businesses are going to give us our new family owned businesses. Those new businesses are what's exciting. And that is going to be the good news when we get to the end of the decade.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time. Thank you to our listeners. Lots of great nuggets in here. We appreciate all the opportunities that you come out and speak with us at the MMLA. And we will graciously invite you back every year. So thank you so much for sharing your time and talent with us today. And thanks for listening.
Thank you so much.